Podcaster? I hardly know her.
Welcome to the I Hardly Know Her podcast, hosted by me, Megan McCaleb. If there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that I still have a lot to learn. This podcast is your invitation to expand your understanding on all sorts of topics and shake things up a little bit. Listen in and learn something new from the stories, professional insights, and a wide range of expertise shared by me and my incredible guests. And remember, my friends, you don't have to be a big deal to do big things. Hey everyone, welcome back to the I Hardly Know Her podcast. Today's guest is someone I've been watching for a while. I've actually known her since high school times. And we kind of just watch people peripherally. I think touch points that are honestly really a kind of a cool part of having social media. And in my own journey and different life transitions I've gone through, a lot of the work of today's guest has really caught my attention because it would have been really helpful. It's one of the things to be like, this would have been nice to know yesterday. The things that could be really advantageous to us. And it's really inspiring to see the progress that she made in tackling such a big topic and creating a business space on the subject of sex therapy. So our guest today is Dr. Cami Hurst. She's a licensed therapist and certified sex therapist in Meridian, Idaho. She operates a private practice offering therapy, coaching, and online small group education. She is a founder and a current president of the Idaho Association of Sexual Health Professionals. And I'm really excited. So she has some other events and things that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But I want to just jump right into it. Welcome to the show, Cami. Thank you so much for joining me.
Like when we knew each other in high school, would you have thought Cami Rogers is going to end up being a sex therapist?
Probably would have been very low on my list of things I would have guessed.
Right?
And yet, although, if you would have asked me then, because I wouldn't have known better, to ask me modern day, I think what I love is seeing people doing the things that we think is unexpected. Like there's so much projecting that I think we do. And yet it's the people that are like doing different kinds of work that really like it makes even more sense to me to have seen you go through this journey. But yeah, I mean, to your point, if we had talked about this in high school, we both would have been like,
yeah, that's not happening, right?
Right.
But here we both are.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are. And I just couldn't wait to be able to share your message with people because I think there's probably a lot of layers. So I can't wait to have you actually like unpack some of the things like what drew you into this space, why is it so important, and I'm curious to see too, like how is it relevant for people with the individual, like what we're needing to bring as an individual so that we can bring these types of things into a healthy partnership. I mean, there's all sorts of goodies. So let's start with first things first. Like what sent you onto this quest of becoming an expert in this field?
Right. I think it was desperation, right?
Okay.
So I always knew I wanted to do some type of therapy. So, my undergrad, when I headed to college, I knew I wanted to do some type of therapy. I don't even know if you remember this, but in high school, we had this group. I think were you a peer mediator with us?
I feel like maybe for a hot minute.
Okay.
I feel like I dabbled in a lot of things.
Yeah, they did this program in high school where they trained some of us in mediation, and it was amazing. I loved it. I loved the training. I loved the skills, and I really loved being able to be that like facilitator, that non-judgmental third party. Like that was my first taste of it.
Yeah.
And so went to college, set myself up for a position to do therapy. Meanwhile, I got married. And I remember I was at a university that was not encouraging women to go into graduate programs. So I was wanting to apply for the marriage and family therapy program while I was young at college. And I got the message that it was too hard. And what if you get pregnant? And, women really, we only accept a few women. And I got the message that it was too hard. And I didn't apply. And so I had my children, and as soon as somewhere in there, I realized I am going back to school at some point. And when my youngest went back to school, I was like, all right, I'm going to go get my master's in marriage and family therapy. And I knew at that point my long-term goal was sex therapy. It wasn't just couples counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Some sex therapists are in this space because it's a space of like, it came easy and they were enjoying it. I'm in this space because I've had to fight for all of the gains I've made, having been raised in just a sexually silent school district, a sexually silent home, a sexually silent home church. It was not a smooth transition for me. And so I had to do a lot of work on my own. And there was just like one point, I read some cheesy quote on Facebook that said something like, you've been given this mountain to show people it can be moved. And I just started bawling. And I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. Yeah. Just to show that it's possible to take something that was difficult and make it a strength, or to learn something new, especially in the sexual health arena. Growing up in a rural area that just didn't prioritize sexual health education, I was like, okay, I think I'm doing this.
Yeah,
so I did.
Good. Okay. And so just that quickly, you're like, boom, all right, this is the path. So tell me a little bit about like, how did you know, even as you started looking at like the family, like the couples and family general dynamic, seeing where that specific need was that something that was really obvious, or that like was in like lists? Like, how did you hone in on such a specific focus?
I think the focus started, and then I found the path to it. It wasn't that I went into marriage and family therapy and then I thought, hey, my next step is going to be sex therapy. I entered knowing I need to find a path to sex therapy. Yeah. And so that was a master's in marriage and family therapy, a postgraduate certificate in sex therapy, and then a PhD in clinical sexology was my education. And the way I knew that was the path was I wasn't finding any help here in Idaho. So, you think, okay, something is wrong, whether it's sexual pain, whether it's low desire, whether it's all sorts of things that we didn't know could happen to us in a relationship. I went first to my OB, and there was no help there. And I was really disappointed. So then I went to a general therapist. There was no help there. I was really disappointed. And it wasn't until I found a sex therapist who could kind of have these conversations, who gave me an excellent education. And I'm like, this is so doable, but nobody knows who to go to. Because the reality of the situation is OBGYNs are only required to take a 9-hour seminar on sexual dysfunction. They do not have the training we're hoping that they would have. Marriage and family therapists are only required to have one sexual health, and it's just a human sexuality course. All other therapists are not required to have a human sexuality course. And so we think there are these experts out there who are going to help us, and they are not trained. And because I faced those obstacles, I was like, we need some resources. And I'm happy to be one. And so that kind of gave me the direction when I decided to jump back into my own life after having kids.
Yeah. Okay. So the need must be tremendous. I mean, it's got to be. Tell me more about like, what are the things that people are experiencing that maybe do people know to even start looking for help? Like, what are some of the pain points or things that are happening that either people are accepting because they don't know that it's a problem? They just think maybe it's unique to them. I mean, I don't even know where to start opening up that.
No, there's a lot.
Because what are the, help me out.
So, we can go through the most common sexual dysfunctions. And one of them is sexual pain, which can have up to like a dozen sources. And it can be really difficult to treat. I mean, there can be vaginismus or endometriosis or vulvodynia, or, so many things can cause pain with penetration. That's one thing that in that case, best course of treatment is to work with a sex therapist and a pelvic floor physical therapist. Some people don't even know those exist. Then another common area is anorgasmia. So 30% of adult women haven't figured out how to have an orgasm sexually.
Oh, mercy.
only 1% are physically unable, and it's usually from a spinal cord issue. And so we've got a lot of women walking around with emotional pain or sexual pain, physical, who don't know who to go to or talk to about it, and maybe feel shamed because our culture is so bold about sexuality that you can feel really alone really quick. Lack of desire is another. I just don't want it. What am I supposed to do about it? And that can come from a whole host of biological, psychological, sociological, or relationship issues. And then a big one, because I also see couples, is desire discrepancy, where we just don't line up. They want this, I want this. And so now we have like a gridlock issue in the relationship. And it's not just women. I've worked with men who have orgasm issues. I've worked with men who are really concerned about the speed or the stamina which they have. And I really like those cases because often just education can really clean this up. So that's maybe like the fifth source I find, is just clearing up misinformation that we absorbed through either what we watch or what we see or what we read or what we hear.
Yeah.
And there's nothing combating it. So right now, I think it's like only 17 states in the United States are required to provide medically accurate sex ed. Idaho is not one of them. Idaho does not have to give medically accurate sexual education. And so we don't have families or the school system or churches reinforcing sexual education from a health point of view.
Yeah, that's so frustrating. That is so incredibly frustrating.
So frustrating.
Yes, and that's our show. We're landing on frustration. No, just kidding. Just kidding. We're not going to leave you hanging there. So, I mean, I'm hearing all these different things that people are experiencing, these different challenges. It's obviously, if we're having, I mean, maybe it's not obvious. If we're having challenges with our physicality, like seeing things pattern for us in society and not feeling like we're doing things the right way, and all the different shame and projections and all the different things, it definitely, they ebb and flow between the physical and the emotional. I mean, that's got to all tie in, right? And then it just feels like it would have a ripple effect of other things feeling out of alignment. If I'm not feeling like I'm having my needs met as a woman or as a partner or the whatever, like I feel like that just has a negative impact on a lot of other areas that may not even seem directly connected. Is that
No,
right?
you're totally right. Yeah, you're totally right. So the research, Barry McCarthy is a little bit of a hero of mine. He did this research and found that for long-term couples in a long-term relationship, if the sex is going well, it adds about 20% to the relationship, where they're like, yeah, that piece works, and the parenting piece works, and the financial piece works. And, it's 20% of the pie. But when sex is not going well, it has an 80% drain on the relationship. Not a 20% drain, an 80% drain on the relationship. And so when you find someone and the sex is going well, that's not the only reason you should commit to being in a relationship. That's 20% reason. But if you're with a partner and the sex is not going well, that's a good reason to not continue in the relationship, because it's an 8% drain.
Whoa. Yeah. Okay. So how can people, if they're hearing this for the first time and they're like, oh my gosh, first of all, I'm not alone or weird because I'm having some issue, because maybe people don't speak up because they think they're the only one, having a problem. So where do they even start, or whatever? Who knows what people are thinking. So if someone's hearing this information though, and they're just now opening up to the idea of like, things could be better. I mean, probably in any relationship, things could always be better if we're understanding how to make sure we're catering to our own needs and understanding how to help other people with their needs. Like what are some first steps, I guess, to help people start?
Yeah. Well, I'm worried that people might have just heard me say that bad sex is not a good relationship to stay in a long-term committed relationship, but that doesn't mean we can't change that 80%. So if you're in the deciding factor of, am I going to stay in this relationship? If the sex or the attraction, or if that is not going well, I'm giving you permission to keep looking. But most of my couples got into a relationship not realizing that would be a major factor. And it is having an 80% drain. And they have children and decades of history. And now we're trying to correct it. And it's very, very flexible. There's a lot we can do to make it better. So I just wanted to clarify that. Like, I'm not saying jump ship, don't try.
Bye.
But if you're in the deciding factor, you can jump ship. If you've got a commitment already and a history, there's so much that we can do to make this go better.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want people to feel hopeful in whatever trajectory they end up needing to head down. So what are some of the ways that you start uncovering, like, how do people articulate the first thing they need to address? Because maybe there is several layers, and I think physical pain. I honestly, jumping onto this call, I had no specific agenda of what was going to happen, because I'm like, I bet I'm going to learn a whole bunch of things. And physical pain, like that part of it, could show up in a lot of different ways too, I am guessing, based on my own experience and things that I've heard from friends. But like, is that usually the first type of thing that maybe people feel like something's wrong? Or I don't know, maybe that's not a great starting. I'm like, how do we figure out how to diagnose what are the challenges, so that we know how to get people moving towards something better?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, when people end up in my office, there's been like years of difficulty. So it's that's a good question to be asking. You know, when you start to recognize either A, there's pain, or B, I don't want to have sex like ever, or C, I am not climaxing, I don't even know what you're talking about, or hey, we are realizing we want a totally different sex life from each other. Or usually people end up in my office when there's been years of pain. And I think it's because they don't know where to go when it starts. And I think that's what I've tried to do to build in my business, is this level of care that people need. So some people just need education. Some people just need to know what they don't know. And so that's why I'm like, okay, I'm just going to offer a free podcast that's just health education. That's, hey, none of us got this at home. None of us got this if we attended a church. None of us got this from our school district. Here is what I didn't even know I know. For most people, that can resolve a lot of things. Not for everyone. So then like that next layer would be, you know, I'm offering these like groups, support groups, where I give the education and I'm able to show up and give people support, validation, and empathy, and specific suggestions. And for some people, that is enough. All these layers before we get to, oh my gosh, I need intensive therapy, which is also something I offer, but I can only see so many people. Here in Idaho, in the Treasure Valley, we've got 6 certified sex therapists. And we've got maybe about that many, again, spread throughout the state. So, I mean, I've got a decent waiting list. So that's been the trick for me, is how do I help people knowing I have a limited number of hours a week and there's a limited number of us available in the state or in the country.
Yeah.
And for some people, education's enough. For others, they need education and support. For others, they need intensive therapy. And so I think that's just where you start and figure out, okay, I've got to get some education on this and see if it resolves. If it didn't resolve, okay, I need more. And you just kind of take that step deeper and deeper and deeper toward intensive therapy. But not everybody needs it to resolve their issues.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. Well, and I'm hoping that maybe some people are hearing this and realizing that there is, you can ask for help or look for help. Like I didn't even think about it, because maybe I am the only woman that's ever felt this way, but we're so used to enduring pain in general that I just assumed that was something I just needed to live with. Like that is something that I carried with me for a very long time. And it didn't even occur to me to look and go, is there something I can be doing to help? Like I wouldn't even have thought to address it, because we're just so comfortable. I was so comfortable just being uncomfortable, just because I thought that was part of having
That's part of it.
a woman's body. I was like,
I
I
know.
guess certain things just are going to hurt for the
I
rest of
know.
my life.
And a lot of our moms and aunts didn't know anything different, and so they perpetuated that idea. When
Yeah.
it comes to this issue, when you transition into a sexual adult or a sexual relationship with a partner, and you start to notice something, I think my first advice would be like, don't assume time is going to fix it. Let's bring it into the room. Let's not keep it private. Let's not keep it hidden. Just be like, hey, I'm noticing I have pain with this or that or this. Or, hey, I was not having a good time when we're doing XYZ. Or, hey, and bring it into the room and not hope that time will make it better. Because that's what I work through then in intensive therapy is the decades of resentment, the decades of arguments, the decades of hurt. And it would be so great if we could like take care of it up front. But none of us got those messages. Nobody told you, Megan, it should not hurt. Never push through sexual pain. Stop. We've got to figure out a solution. We do not want to pair pain and sex because that will impact your desire. If you get punched in the face every time you eat ice cream, you are not going to want ice cream.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it will start to then work on your desire and your libido, and you're not going to want to have sex if it hurts.
Yeah.
And so I'm just, we all need to be sending that message that to address things earlier than later. That you're in really good company. Most people who are having difficulty are in really good company. There's a major percentage. What is it? I think it's like 65% of people at some time will experience sexual dysfunction. The majority of us, as we go from 15 to 95, we will have a sexual problem. Most of us will. We need to be able to talk about it.
So start casting the vision of what success looks like when people are having some good things, some awareness. What does it do for them? How to I guess maybe that's two part. Let's start with what does it really look like when people are starting to experience success in this as they're tackling the challenge?
Yeah, that's a good question because there's a universal argument. Well, not a lot of people have opinions about what is healthy sexually and what is unhealthy sexually. Okay.
Ooh, okay.
And so we have to start there of what is sexual health? What's our vision of sexual health? And for me, I'm rooted in the 6 principles of sexual health, which were given to us by the World Health Organization. And Doug Braun-Harvey's work has really streamlined it. So basically, the World Health Organization in 2013 was like, hey, if we as a world, as globally want to prevent sexual harm, sexual pain, and sexual trauma, these 6 things need to be in place for people who are engaging in sex. And so I start there. The first is consent. That needs to be consensual, free from coercion, free from verbal and emotional coercion, not just from physical force. So we start to talk about what really is consent. And that a lot of times people think that it operates differently when they're single and dating than when they're in a long-term committed relationship, that all of a sudden it's implied consent because we're committed to one another. And that can get people in some really sticky situations.
Yeah.
So that first principle is, how are you practicing consent with each other? The second is non-exploitation, which means it's just simply not using any form of power to get what we want sexually, no, like I'm the breadwinner but these are my needs, but that we meet each other on a level of I'm no better than you and I'm no worse than you, but we're different and we need to figure this out without, I had a couple I worked with and it just broke my heart that she had to earn all the furniture she wanted in her house through sexual standards that he put for her. That's exploitation.
Yeah.
That's using power to get something that you want, financial power, and his position in the house. That was not cool. The third is honesty, that we need to be honest with one another in order for sex to go well. Honest if it hurt. Honest about what it means to us. So one night stands in and of themselves are not harmful as long as both people know and are honest that this is just right now. When you're promised things, or you believe, oh, this means they love me, or this means we're gonna be together, then you start to get into some sexual harm, pain, trauma. You could have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So honesty is right up there as a necessary value. Honesty also about our desires, like some of the weird stuff about us, or our viewing habits, those kinds of things that can get hidden in a relationship and then cause some pain once it's discovered. If we're upfront about it, it's going to go a lot better. Fourth is shared values, meaning when I'm working with a couple, I'm not trying to have them embrace my values. That would be completely unethical. But it's helpful in a committed partnership if those two people share similar values. It's going to go better. And when I mean values, I'm not really talking about like behaviors. Some people will say, oh, this is a traditional value, or this is a sexual value. Some people would say abstinence is a sexual value. And I'd say, oh, no, that's a behavior. That's something you're, when I'm talking about shared values, it's if one person values novelty really high and the other person values consistency really high, it's going to show up in the bedroom and there's going to be a little bit of a problem. And so, values research shows, I think, when our prefrontal cortex starts to solidify around 25, we usually have 4 or 5 core values that lead us as a person. Nobody's are better than another's, but they might be different. And so that person who really values consistency and security might have a difficult time sexually with someone who really values spontaneity and novelty. So that's the fourth one, is looking at, do we share some of these values and what would they look like in the bedroom? The fifth is protection from STIs and any unwanted pregnancies. That's a sexual health principle that everyone, deserves access to information that might impact our health. Knowing how many partners someone has been with, knowing if they were using protection, and being on the same page about family planning and physical health. And then the sixth is mutual pleasure, that this isn't one-sided. This isn't something that gets done to someone. This isn't something that another owns the right to, even if the other person isn't having a good time. That in order to prevent, as a public health initiative, to prevent sexual harm and sexual trauma, we need to prioritize mutuality, that there's mutual opportunity for pleasure in the experience. So I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for, but you said, where do I start? And I'm like, I start here. Here is what we know needs to be present. And it's much more than consent. Consent's not enough. Consent's one of 6 things that we need as public health initiative, or as we talk to our girlfriends, or we talk to our partners, or we talk to our kids, that we're letting them know these 6 things, if you're following these, are really going to prevent any trauma or harm. I can't promise you'll have a good time, but I can get pretty close to promising you're not going to be traumatized.
Which is, boy, we could all use a little less trauma in this world in general, especially around something that is it could be a very fulfilling, delightful part of our lives when it feels healthy. This is magical. I hope that if you were driving and listening to that part, rewind it and jot down those 6 things, because that really does bring a full scope of all of the different elements that I honestly, this is a lot of really great information for me. Like you hear about these different things separately as totally individual topics, depending on who you're talking to and whatever facet of a relationship. And I think having these drive our health in the sexual space is so cool. Like this feels really empowering.
Most of us want that. Most of us are like, I want a healthy sexual relationship, but then it's like, well, define healthy. I don't know. So it's nice that the World Health Organization did some research, put these all together, and was like, you guys, if we're going to really prevent sexual trauma, sexual harm, sexual pain, if we can just get these 6 basics down in our
Yeah.
public discourse.
Oh, totally. Because I imagine everybody really being able to approach it from their individual perspective will help them know how to meet a partner in that conversation. Because then you really can see where things do line up or where there maybe needs to be some conversations. You know,
And
if
it shows what's
ideally,
missing. Go
oh,
ahead.
for sure. I was just gonna say, ideally, it'd be great if everyone knew this before they started partnering up, because
Mhm.
there's so much that goes unsaid. I think
Yeah.
I mean, I know that from my own experience in life and various uh, connections in religious spaces and other communities, that where it's not talked about until like you maybe mention something, and so someone else feels safe saying something, and then we sort of have conversations, but there's still sort of like this hush hush thing, because by
Mhm.
then we've already all fallen into this routine of just trying to get through. It almost feels like a lot of our life then is um tethered to like, well, now I'm here
Yeah. And
and
you're talking
trapped.
about like having sexual endurance instead of mutual pleasure, right? And so that
Yeah.
isn't going to be sustainable or enjoyable in the long run.
Yeah.
And when we look at like what is offered, most, if we've got a abstinence only based education in the public schools, which we do here in Idaho and in the states surrounding us, except for Washington and Oregon, that the sexual health unit consisted only of number 5 of how to prevent STIs, and we call them STIs now instead of STDs because
Yeah.
they're infections and they're all treatable. They're not
Yeah.
diseases that are untreatable. That was
Thank you for
part of the
clarifying that. I do
yeah,
remember hearing that, but some
yeah.
people may be hearing this for the first time, because I do sometimes still hear people refer to them as STDs, but thank you for the
And that's what
additional
we were
clarification.
taught. But
Yeah.
it adds to the fear of the language. It adds to this can be really scary instead of most of these things are treatable, you know.
Yeah.
So that's all we got in most of our education was how to prevent STIs and how pregnancy happens.
Mhm.
Um, I'm sure when I was going to high school, if someone would have suggested that pleasure should be a part of the education, people would have freaked out.
Oh, yeah.
But it's necessary for it to be healthy. It must be
Totally.
pleasurable for both people in order for it to be healthy. And I
Yes.
wish all those teenage girls and teenage boys would have walked away with that understanding of, oh, I need to make sure my partner's having a good time. This isn't all about me having a good time. This is like a
100%.
co-created mutual experience, or should be
Yeah.
if it's going to be healthy.
Yeah. So on that note, because now we're parents, we've got, there's still a lot of people our age who are not comfortable in this dialogue yet. Hopefully this starts opening up the comfort level for people who are hearing this in a new way or for the first time. So as we take accountability for ourselves, and like, I mean, I really want to revisit some of these things because I feel like I've grown, and I've definitely done a lot of exploring of listening to all sorts of books and podcasts and things, and trying to really be confident in understanding what I want and knowing
Mhm.
myself as an individual. And there's still some stuff that I'm like, oh, I want to revisit. So if people are, first of all, taking the accountability for ourselves, really being honest about what's happening, where we feel like we could maybe seek some support and additional information, then like, I feel like it's up to us to also help educate our kids
Mhm.
and invite them into this understanding from a very young age. I mean, is that where we're going? I mean, can we take it there
Yeah.
for a minute of like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it
We
feels
can
like this
start
is the type of
talking
thing that
about these
we can
things.
break cycles. Let's fill the
Yes.
gaps of
And I
what's
think most
lacking.
of us want to break a cycle, but we don't know how. You
Yeah.
know, most of us were like, I want to give my kids something different than what I was given. Um,
Mhm.
and, but I don't really know how. How do you be sex positive? But I also want them to be careful and smart and wise. And um, I think a lot of these conversations can be taken in a non-sexual space first when they're really
Yeah.
young before you bring them to a sexual space where you talk about,
Mm.
when we play a game, we want it to be mutual. Am I playing this game in a way that lets everyone else at the table have a good time? Or am I playing this game in a way that makes people have a crappy time? Talking about mutual pleasure as a family value. Talking about honesty as a value, that I know it's uncomfortable to bring this up, but the sooner you bring it up, the more likely we are to fix it or to deal with it, or thank you so much for being honest and bringing that sexual question to me. I'm so glad you just asked me what a vulva was. I'm so glad you just asked me what a penis looks like, and thanks for being honest that that's something you'd like to learn about. Or a non-exploitation of, oh, so when that kid at school was manipulating you, that's called exploitation. He was trying to use the power from being bigger than you to get the ball you had. Do you know what that's called? That feels crappy. Doesn't that feel crappy? What's our form of power? Do we ever use it in a way that's selfish? We don't want to do that in our family. We don't want to use our power in a selfish way. And consent,
Yeah.
this is going much better for our generation than it did for us, of no obligation hugs, no obligation.
Oh, yeah.
No, there's no obligation for affection. It should be felt. If you feel warm towards someone and want to touch them, that's what we're looking for. If you feel cold and feel like you have to touch someone, that's not great. And
Yeah.
even practicing that, I've had to get real good at that with a child I have that's got some sensory issues, and to take it seriously, not personally. Like, is today a hug day? No, it's not a hug day. All right, how about a high five? And I'll talk like that with my kids of, would a hug feel good or would something else feel better? And that's letting my children get used to advocating for themselves about what they want. And when that isn't learned before we enter a sexual space, it's not going to show up in a sexual space. If we can't say what we would prefer, if we can't say how we're actually feeling outside of the bedroom, we're not somehow magically going to be able to show up in the bedroom and say, hold on, you know how sometimes I get that trauma thing and I just shut down? It's happening right now. Like, we need to be able to say that inside and outside of the bedroom.
Oh, man. This is so good. Yeah. And that, I feel like, that's it. Everyone, like, really, everyone needs to figure out what is a way that they can integrate these things in whatever way feels comfortable that's outside of that space first. Because we have so much learning and growing. And I even, like, in learning a lot of things that I want to help my kids with, I remember it finally dawning on me several years ago now that, like, I instinctively usually want to hug people just because I'm a hugger. And then I was like, okay, wait. So then I've really started to shift, and I'm like, I need to make sure that I have permission in the space of, like, not just being a hugger, or I can identify myself as that's what I do now, is then, like, if I'm parting ways with someone, sometimes it just naturally, I meet a new lady and we go to coffee and whatever, and then we naturally both go into the hug, and then we kind of still talk about it. But I feel like it is becoming more prevalent as that awareness comes up too, is like, are we going in for a handshake, a hug, a high five? Like, even offering alternatives to adults has really helped me heighten my awareness of how to make sure my kids are feeling like they get to speak up and interact in a way that makes them feel empowered and comfortable.
Yeah, and a way that we can promote that is by saying thank you when they do practice consent with us. When someone says, I'm not really a hugger, be like, thank you for telling me that. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. And if our kids get used to us saying, thank you for telling me that, I want you to feel comfortable with me, their red flags will shoot up the first time they're with a partner and they say, I'm not loving this. And they say, I'm going to do it anyway. That should feel so wrong to them, because they are so used to us as parents saying, thank you for telling me about that. I want you to be comfortable. We can high five instead of, come on, don't you love me? Oh, gross.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's so many good things. Thank you for bringing such like tangible steps. Like, this is exactly what I always hope for, is that people can hear something, maybe get a new perspective on something that they are curious about or totally oblivious to. I mean, it's any range of things, right? and to really have some steps of things that they can start considering today. Like this episode feels like a great journal prompt for you to spend some time exploring with yourself. Maybe if you're in a partnership, encourage the conversation around that too. I always talk to my clients when I do like improv workshop. Obviously, you probably know I teach improv workshops. Yes, and versus yeah, but. And sometimes they like, now when they have the new awareness, they will often go, well, now what do I do about my partner at home that doesn't know the difference between yes and yeah, but. And I'm like, you get to just enthusiastically tell them what you learned, how you perceived it, how it works. And then we get to start laying the groundwork. So I feel like this is a probably totally the same thing is like if someone really wants their partner to engage in this kind of self-awareness too, it's more like we get to start with us.
Yeah. And it's totally
share with
Googleable.
enthusiasm.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I didn't make these up. I would feel really uncomfortable if I had made something up and was saying, "Here, follow this," right? Like this is rooted in some research. This is rooted in a lot of things, and it's very Googleable. Be like, let's Google that. There's lots of podcasts out there, lots of articles out there written. If you want to understand it in like a deeper way, just those 6 principles of sexual health.
I love it.
If you want to share it with your partner, you can be like, "I didn't even know this was a thing. What do you think?"
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And so, yeah, I encourage any of you listeners out there. And if they do want to engage with you, though, because you do have some offerings and clearly your passion is to help people find joy and health and balance and fulfillment in this area. So talk to me a little bit about where people can find you. What are some of your next steps for people who are thinking, "Ooh, I want to be on Team Cami and figure out my stuff in her space."
Yeah. So like I said, like I've got a podcast called Sex Therapy 101. It's on all platforms. I've been doing it since about 2019. My main goal there really is to just offer people the education that we didn't get. I don't run it in the summer. It's about to pick back up now, but there's a bunch of episodes there that are either interviews or lectures, or I've got a lot of book reviews. That's one of my favorite things to do once a month is I read a sexual health book and then I review it and rate it of what I thought was great, what wasn't so great.
Cool.
And then the next level would be, check out some of my support groups. They're each 6 set weeks. So there's like a curriculum for 6 weeks that has education and then some group support, really small, online, private help as a way to get access to help maybe while you're on a waiting list with someone or to see if that's enough for you. It's a much more affordable option. And then I do offer intensive therapy for individuals and couples facing sexual issues.
I love it. Thanks for recapping that. We'll definitely have links to connecting to all of those in the show notes. So make sure you check it out. And I know you mentioned kind of as we wrap things up here, I know you mentioned at the beginning that there's kind of a disparity between the number of people who are in your line of work and the volume of need that is there. So for, I don't know how many therapists I have in my listenership, but are you seeing like among peers, like that this conversation is like, hey, we need more people in this space? Is it like becoming more of a hot topic?
Well, I have no room for competition in my life. So jump in, get in here. If you're a therapist and you have, yes, let's do this. We need you. There will be the work. And part of that is I also offer continuing ed credits and courses for therapists. So I have 2 courses. One is sexual health competency for the average mental health professional, level 1 and level 2, trying to really up Idaho's competency in sexual issues.
Awesome.
And that leads me into that other passion project I have, which is Idaho Sexual Health Professionals, which is an association for urologists, OBs, physical therapists, mental health therapists, social workers, every discipline who would deal with someone who had a sexual concern. We have now an association here in Idaho with an annual conference and regular newsletter information. And just, I don't want a 19-year-old girl to have the same experience I had. I want people to be able to go to the people they trust and be able to get adequate care. And as a rural state, most states need more help, but as a rural state, we really, really have room to grow.
Yeah, sounds like it. And I hope we keep things going in the right direction. Thank you for doing the challenging yet obviously like really important work that can bring so much joy and satisfaction into our lives. And so I am so glad that we finally were able to connect. We had a little bit of bebopping around to get on the schedule. And so I really, really appreciate you making the time to join me on the podcast. And thank you for all of the work that you do. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. I've loved watching you build. I'm just so inspired by how you build. And it's been beautiful. I've been watching you too.
I love that. Well, thank you. You're amazing. Thank you. All right. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into another episode of the I Hardly Know Her podcast, produced by Jeanette, my friend here, and cohort with Improv Team Culture. If any of you are out there listening and would like some additional tools for leadership communication or public speaking, you can learn more at improvteamculture.com. We want to help you to share your stories, connect better, and communicate clearly with joy and enthusiasm with our favorite tool, improvisation. And we thank you so much for your time. And we can't wait to have you again in the future on another episode of I Hardly Know Her. Ooh, I just made up a new jingle. All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the I Hardly Know Her podcast. For information about leadership workshops, public speaker training, and all things kooky Megan, check out improvteamculture.com. We'll catch you next time.